everybody. Welcome to this webinar on artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence can drive growth in Africa. This webinar is the third webinar in a series of webinars that we've hosted together with the Technology Innovation Agency, excuse me, the Small Enterprise Development Agency, and partner Africa Bio. For those of us who've been with us throughout this 3 webinar series, you'll recall that we started this webinar series discussing the issue of smart agriculture, where we discussed how smart technologies can enable growth within the agriculture sector, and how it can enable technology transfer using the patent system. We also discussed in the second webinar about IP in general and how IP can be used in a way to generate income, particularly for small businesses and so forth. In this webinar, we'll be focusing on artificial intelligence, and we'll discuss the artificial intelligence from basics. What is artificial intelligence? What is the South African position in terms of funding? Are we making use of artificial intelligence in the most effective manner? We'll look at some projects that have been initiated in the space of artificial intelligence in South Africa and across Africa. And lastly, we will also then look at global trends. We'll look at how then do we link artificial intelligence to patentability requirements and technology transfer and knowledge transfer and so forth. We have with us a very esteemed panel who will be joining us to make this presentation. We have the head of ICT at the Technology Innovation Agency. We have Dr. Miquel Frigola, Dr. Fidele, and Ntie-Kang, Professor Kana, and Edoardo Pastore as our panelists, who will be taking us through the different discussions. I hope that you will enjoy this session and that you will find value in what will be discussed by our panelists. With that, I'd like to officially open this webinar, and without wasting too much time, because I'm sure you want to hear more from our panelists than from me, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who's going to take us briefly through what is artificial intelligence, and also, as I mentioned earlier, are we as South Africa making optimal use of artificial intelligence? And from a funding perspective, what does that funding landscape look like? So I'm pleased to welcome Thabang Mpye, who is the head of ICT at the Technology Innovation Agency. Thabang, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, esteemed colleagues. My name is Thabang Mpye, Head ICT at the Technology Innovation Agency. We are basically an entity of the Department of Science and Innovation, focusing, amongst others, and key on commercialization of innovative ventures and ideas in South Africa. And without further ado, I would like to share my presentation. Okay, just a sec. Okay. Okay, just a sec, apologies. Okay, are you seeing, is my screen visible, Chair? Okay.
No, it's not projecting. Okay, there it is. Okay,
yeah,
it's not coming.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, basically, the first part of the presentation, I will be going through an introduction of artificial intelligence, and primarily from a layman's term, and also in perspective of artificial intelligence from the view of the fourth industrial revolution, under which we see that AI is being punted. Now, what is artificial intelligence? It describes as, for example, from the Access Partnership, the University of Pretoria, as a constellation of technologies that enable machines to achieve a machine learning capability, and basically escalating them to higher levels of intelligence to emulate human capability of us. Basically, we know our intelligence in a natural human sense constitutes first sensing the environment, data. Computers can do that, comprehending, processing that information. Computers do that, but via programs and normally through algorithm, which is a static process, and then having to act on that. Now with artificial intelligence, all that is doable with computers, and basically giving them a functionality to automate processes and act smartly. Now, taking you through, okay, just a sec. Okay, yes. Now, taking you through the industrial revolutions, if we've had them before, we've had the steam engine phase around 1770, 1780, and then followed by the mass production capability and advent of electricity around 1870. Then recently, around 1970, we had development in electronics and IT systems, microchips, and automation. And then of recent, around the year 2000, the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, mostly focusing around cyber physical systems, Internet of Things, and automated systems, and augmented reality. Now, if you look at the space in between these revolutions, you'll see that the first three, there was about a span of a century between them. And now recently, with the fourth industrial revolution, we moved from the third industrial revolution to the fourth revolution in a period of 30 years, showing that this advancement of the industrial revolutions, it's happening less frequently, and some will say even more disruptive in a technology sense. Now, and this is in a colloquial type of approach to say, is artificial intelligence fueling fourth industrial revolution? And you'll see why I put this as a question. These are the key main pillars of fourth industrial revolution. And the key one to highlight is autonomous systems, of which artificial intelligence will be it's a key stimulant of that. But in retrospect, one can then ask, is 4IR the one resuscitating fourth industrial revolution? Why is that raised? Is that in fact, artificial intelligence has been around. It's an idea which was punted from around 1950. There's been tests already done back then through the 50s and the 60s by academics, already venturing into the ideas of learning engines. And unfortunately, between 1970 and 1990, there was what is termed the artificial intelligence winter, wherein there was reduced activity in the innovations around artificial intelligence. And then coincidentally, or maybe not, towards the second millennium, that's when now with the 4IR coming, we also seeing the appetite and more work on artificial intelligence happening. So applications of artificial intelligence in the biospace, we can look at examples. obviously, in the biospace, I would categorize those around industrial biotechnology, medical biotechnology, agricultural, and food processing. And the examples are that we've seen, for example, in industrial biotechnology and in food processing, there was artificial intelligence played a great role. Also in the area of biotechnology, agricultural biotechnology, that is AI-based tools have been playing an essential role in the processing of genetic modification and to study features of around crops and also helping to forecast possible yields. Going forward. And also in the around robotics also, we've seen artificial intelligence can also be used in harvesting, processing, packaging, and other essential tasks. And again, in medical biotechnology, we've seen artificial intelligence machines playing a critical role in the field of drug manufacture and data analysis. And also, most importantly, even one can use the example of the recent corona pandemic, where now we had questions being raised about the speed at which clinical trials can be run, and artificial intelligence showed to play a contributory role in that. Then the impact of also in life sciences, a variant of a subdivision of artificial intelligence called deep learning, and also with that using neural networks has also played a big role in the life sciences aspect of artificial intelligence. So there's also a component of artificial intelligence that's been called artificial intelligence in life sciences, AILSCI, which has also been conceptualized, and it helps more in the research space for academia to communicate their scientific work, do peer reviews seamlessly, and also shortening the editorial review time spans. So with that, I just wanted to touch on the overview of artificial intelligence, specifically with relation to fourth industrial revolution, and also in the bio and life sciences domain. And going forward, the question comes from the domain which we operate in as Technology Innovation Agency, as one of our mandates, and which is to assist bridge the technology chasm, innovation chasm in the South African land space. And taking you through a model which was shared by researchers, including one Fidele from the University of Pretoria. If you look at this axis, you will have it will be a normal product life cycle of an innovative idea, product or solution. And normally what's been happening is that as South Africa, we've always had research institutions and higher education institutions operating. So they would, especially post 1994, before the new democratic dispensation, we had the resources to do basic and applied researches. But what used to happen is that moving on to the higher axis, that research would, and it's not only research, even commodities in our gold mines and raw mineral deposits that the country is endowed with, that research and raw materials would then be exported to overseas countries wherein the development will be advanced, leading even into production. And then what happened is that South Africa ends up now consuming back those products and services, which stem from our natural resources and our basic research. And hence, showing that there is an island in between, a chasm, a space, if you can call it. Some researchers call it the Death Valley, wherein there's weak technology flow and transfer. And the government, the DSI, and even institutions like TIA are mandated to focus bridging that technology transfer chasm, and to obviously help improve our trade balance as the country. So we're stimulating more research and innovation thereof and commercialization. We're fervently driving that agenda so that we close this technology innovation chasm. And South Africa, this is a slide from the World Intellectual Property Organization, the latest survey for 2021. In the sub-Saharan Africa, we're doing very well. We're still #1 in innovation outputs, though a country like Mauritius, a smaller cities, it's actually faring better than South Africa. And I think with the WIPO study, it was left out because of it being an island. So, and following hot on the heels, you have countries like Kenya and Tanzania. So there is competition. South Africa needs to do more work, but again, that competition is healthy for the African countries. And it also needs to be improved to try and match the European countries, your Switzerland and Israel. Now, a perspective from how we can view the government's drive towards the stimulation of artificial intelligence. And please take this as more of a discussion, meaning you can go apply your mind about around the views. And also, ultimately, I mean, government is busy always working on the policies around 4IR and artificial intelligence. So this should stimulate the experts to go apply their minds and contribute to government's policy formulation. So government in 2019, through the Department of Digital and Communication and Digital Technologies, gazetted the Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And in there, it was highlighted, amongst others, that there is capacity and appetite for high-performance computing, which is a key enabler of artificial intelligence, used by the likes of State Information Technology Agency, SITA at the forefront, Weather Bureau, South African Medical Research Council, SANSA, and the other state agencies. But what seemed to be the opinion I would share with the colleagues is that if you look at the assessment from the Commission's report, is that artificial intelligence, it's viewed more keenly on around the big data pillar of Fourth Industrial Revolution, not so much on the medical and biosciences domain, where it also plays a key role. And again, going back to how I introduced artificial intelligence, to say some scholars view it, or people view it, as a component of Fourth Industrial Revolution, whereas it came to being about 50 years before 4IR. So, and if you look at the 4IR technologies, most of them are on the ICT side with set standards, which one can regard as plug and play, meaning it's most of these technologies, for you to embrace them, one needs to little bit of research, but more of investment and solution integration. Whereas artificial intelligence requires constant research and nurturing. It requires that effort, that unless if that requirement is flagged properly, we might be expecting, and we by meaning even the government, expect artificial intelligence to be a technology which you will need to acquire off the shelf, meaning you might miss the opportunity to invest in the actual research and the development around it, especially around learning engines. So for me, it's a flag that I think it needs to be raised and maybe clarity be sought. And on the positive side, the Commission did state a recommendation about the requirement to urgently establish an artificial intelligence institute and also build capacity around the subdivisions, amongst others, of AI, natural networks, computer visions, and also on the social side, on the issue of indigenous knowledge systems. Even at TIA, we have such programs. Government is also aligned with that view that in the development of AI, we need to also invest and focus on natural processing. And lastly, the health and biosciences benefits or relevance of AI were, in my opinion, a bit understated on the Commission's report, just the one paragraph. And with this, obviously, as you'll see, with the examples of the investments that we at STIA has made in the field, that it's a bit of an understatement. AI plays a key role, and you'll see even with examples some of the innovations which affect the well-being of the society. So going to the examples, TIA has, for example, and proudly funded, and this was in collaboration with our sister and cousin, if I can say, institutions like the Innovation Hub, Twiga Innovation Labs, and MLab South Africa, a solution which was branded MedSol, artificial intelligence solution. And basically the solution delivered a pre-tested, meaning post-technology readiness level 9, a live diagnostic screening, which would helps in the faster diagnosis of breast cancer in South Africa, which behind other key pandemics, we know it's a health challenge and a burden to the female population mostly, and our health system. And second to that, we have also funded, and it's still a live project. We are doing final pre-commercialization testing with a company in the Western Cape, which is developing an artificial mind engine. We've already done a lot of tests, though, like, as I mentioned, that AI is viewed mostly biased towards ICT applications. For example, in this case, in aspects of video intelligence, video surveillance, security, and public safety domains. That artificial mind engine /AME also has a capability and will be implemented in diagnostic of chest X-rays and assist in the health system in the analysis and diagnostic on a remote sense of X-ray results. So in closing, the view, and again open to the discussion, is yes, artificial intelligence is it's a key proponent of fourth industrial revolution, and it has ample potential for new innovations. There is appetite. We have a strong pipeline at the Technology Innovation Agency, but the issues which I think need further discussion is that for artificial intelligence to gain proper support, especially at government level, should be viewed not necessarily as a subcomponent of 4IR. Like I said, it might be construed as plug and play, but as a technology which is an enabler to the 4IR. And yes, the government with the 4IR Commission is supporting, and we hope that the recommendations of the 4IR Commission are taking place, and a AI Commission can be established. But that, I feel we still need room, a platform for more debate around AI, especially also directing it towards the health and bio domain. Thanks, and I think I'll welcome discussions, Chair, or questions.
Thank you very much, Thabang, for that presentation and insights into artificial intelligence. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. We can take a few questions. You're also welcome to put your questions in the chat and in the Q&A section. Okay, so we'll move on to the next section, where we'll be discussing artificial intelligence and machine learning in drug discovery. And that presentation will be given by Dr. Miquel Frigola. And we also talk about large-scale analysis of data of floral contents. And that presentation will be given by Dr. Fidele Ntie-Kang. So without further ado, I hand over to you, Dr. Miquel. Dr. Miquel is the lead scientist at Eurasia Open Source. And he's currently the visiting scientist at the H3D platform at UCT. Over to you.
Okay, so hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and especially thanks, Thabang, for a wonderful overview on what's going on and might be going on in the future with regards to AI here in Africa. So I'm going to focus today on how artificial intelligence can help or expedite the process of discovering drug molecules. How can it make it perhaps more cost-effective, and how can it make it faster? So as mentioned already, I'm the lead scientist and co-founder of a small charity, a small non-profit based in the UK called Ercilia. And the goal of Ercilia is basically to disseminate machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies in low and middle income countries, and in particular in countries of the sub-Saharan Africa. Today we'll be focusing on open source drug discovery. That is, how can we use machine learning and open source tools to help discover new drugs more efficiently and without perhaps having to do the huge investments that are currently done from the pharmaceutical industry. As we all know, drug discovery is a process that is mostly led by Western countries, mainly because it requires a lot of time and it requires a huge investment. You might know the numbers, but in order to develop a drug, usually you take no less than 10 years, and the investment required is over 2 billion on average. Yeah, so This is very important to take into account because when we look at the drugs that are currently under development, most of the drugs, I think it's over 90% of the drugs currently under investigation are focused on non-communicable diseases. These are diseases that are not infections, and these are diseases that are prevalent in the West. When it comes to low and middle income countries, as we know, infectious diseases are quite prevalent, and unfortunately only less than 10% of the drugs that we are currently investigating are targeting these disease areas. So the hope or the promise of artificial intelligence is that we can implement those tools to make the time and the cost to drug discovery shorter than the conventional drug discovery pipeline, and also the throughput or the number of molecules that we can consider much higher, right? So the idea or the hope is that by using artificial intelligence, we can make drug discovery faster and also improve our chances of discovering a good drug, because we are able to consider more drugs than we would have been able to do with conventional experiments. This sounds good, I hope, but as already mentioned by Thabang in the previous talk, even if artificial intelligence might be cost effective or even cheap, the problem becomes when we have to implement it, right? Only 6% of the papers that you can find in the scientific literature share code, which means that artificial intelligence is really not plug and play. It's really not reusable as it is today. We also lack benchmarks most of the times, and for many of the methods that we have, there is no experimental validation. All of this contributes to the perception that the artificial intelligence models are sort of black boxes, and therefore, and for this reason, I think, and also because strong technical skills are required, the adoption of artificial intelligence tools in research laboratories worldwide is slower than expected and than desirable. If we focus on drug discovery, for instance, as we said, the drug discovery process takes anything between 10 and 15 years, and it's a very complex process. I'm just simplifying it here. It begins with preclinical research, that is discovering targets for a drug that we might be interested in. Then after discovering the target that we might want to target, we need to identify in the laboratory some lead molecules that might potentially engage this target so that the target becomes actionable and therefore hopefully cure the disease. Once we have identified some molecules, we have to optimize them. We have to make sure that they are not toxic, that they will reach the tissue that they are meant to reach, etc. Then we have to do clinical trials. And even when the drug has passed clinical trials, there's some post-approval regulations that might take 1 to 2 years. All of this process takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money. So as I was saying before, there are artificial intelligence methods that are tackling virtually every step of the drug discovery pipeline, from discovering the disease genes that might be relevant for a particular disease, to optimizing the chemical libraries that we experiment with in the lab, to inventing new molecules, to anticipating toxicity, and even in designing clinical trials. Yeah, so there are a lot of methodologies out there. The problem is how we integrate them so that they become really plugged into the drug discovery pipeline, that we currently have. So because this is so complex and I only have like another 5 minutes to talk, I just want to focus here on 3 buzzwords or even keywords, I think, that you might hear in the future about machine learning. One are generative models, the other is transfer learning, and the other is decentralized learning. Generative models are basically those models that are able to invent new molecules, de novo. This is a picture of a portrait of someone that was generated by a computer. So generative models in drug discovery are able to generate molecules by the computer, not as we used to do traditionally by a medicinal chemist. This is an impressive technology that is currently being applied. The second, technology, artificial intelligence technology that I think can be disruptive in drug discovery is transfer learning. The idea of transfer learning is that we learn something from a particular context, for instance, experimental experiments in the laboratory, in vitro experiments, and we transfer this learning, we transfer this neural network into a context that is more relevant, for instance, the clinical context. Okay, this can be this is also called bedside to bedside translation. Okay, transfer learning algorithms are currently being developed and they are quite promising in the field of drug discovery. And finally, decentralized learning. This is an extremely exciting technology that is just emerging. And the idea of this is that when we are training machine learning models, as you might know, we need a lot of data. And this data can have privacy issues, right? Some data might be private, we will hear more about this in this webinar today. So some data might have privacy restrictions. So there are now machine learning technologies that are able to learn from data that is not visible to all of the partners. Yes, so that in principle, multiple institutions could contribute their data without compromising the IP and contribute to the training of a single machine learning model that benefits from the data from multiple institutions. So these technologies, even if they are in their infancy, are quite promising. Just for you to see an example of something that I developed, this is a generative model that is inventing molecules, potential drug candidates against malaria. If you are a chemist, you will recognize that these molecules do make sense somehow, and you will recognize how difficult it is to invent each one of these molecules. Here I'm just showing, I think, about 500, but of course, this generative model can go on and go on and go on, producing candidates that might be considered eventually. This is how I think artificial intelligence can expedite the process of drug discovery, by generating new hypotheses, new ideas for the experimentalists to consider. Very good. So how does our initiative, or where do we have to focus if we want to make machine learning usable for everyone? So as I said, there is a lot of research going on in terms of how we make machine learning models, but unfortunately the deployment, that is how we make machine learning model useful for others, useful for non-experts, is still not optimal. Yes, so in our initiative, in our silly open source initiative, we are particularly focused on this step. We do all the machine learning process that starts from the raw data and goes all the way to validation. That is training, processing the data, testing the models, etc. And then at the end, we do a deployment layer so that each machine learning asset becomes a very simple software that researchers can use, so that at the end of the day, even if very complicated things happen inside here, a researcher interested, for instance, in a drug, can use this tool and predict the potential targets of this drug. Okay, so this is how I think machine learning should be implemented and disseminated across laboratories worldwide, especially in drug discovery. Just for you to give you an example, as you might know, medicinal chemistry and drug discovery works a lot based on publications, and publications can be cumbersome and difficult to understand sometimes, right? So for instance, this publication, very good publication, was trying to predict broad spectrum antibiotics, published in Cell in 2020. Very interesting, but very involved. We do all the process of learning from this publication and producing a machine learning model accordingly, so that a researcher can have an interface where they can input their drug. Halicin, for instance, is a drug, and they can get a prediction. In this case, halicin is predicted to have antibiotic activity against E. coli, which is a bacteria. Also, this is another interesting paper based on a larger scale and very, very costly experiment on antimalarial drug discovery. This paper is very interesting, but again, quite involved to understand and also to deal with the data. So we do we do all the process of building a machine learning model on top of this paper so that a researcher can come with their drug of interest and get a prediction of whether this drug could be an anti-malaria or not. Of course, we also do this in collaboration. So as I said before, I'm currently at the University of Cape Town at H3D. And here, basically, what we're trying to do is we deal with the data of our collaborators. We build machine learning models together with them, and so that they can have an interface at the end of the day where they can have their questions and get their answers. Yes? Very good. So all of this comes together into something that we call the Ercilia Model Hub. And there are other hubs out there. Our hub is particular in two senses. It's focused on antimicrobial drug discovery and is focused mostly on machine learning models that are related to making the process of drug discovery faster. Okay, so our hub will contain, we hope, about 100 models by the end, 200 models by the end of the year. It contains already more than 100 now. Very good. So just a reminder before I wrap up. I think that the most important step in machine learning and artificial intelligence is data collection and integration. So this is an example of what we do to integrate all the data that we are gathering to build our models. As you know, or as you might know, biology is a very complex landscape, and we have to integrate all of the data that we gather into structure that makes sense. So this is the kind of structure that we use. We organize data into genes, compounds, diseases, tissue cells, biological pathways, compartments, etc. And then given this schema or this metadata, we put all of the data that we can gather from the literature so that we have a very, very, very complex, larger scale graph that we can use for building our models. This is key. And this also exemplifies how difficult machine learning can be. Nothing is just, as it was said before, plug and play. Machine learning requires research. Machine learning requires constant updating of the data. Then finally, once you have gathered all the data, what you need to do is you need to have a framework or a tool that is able to build machine learning models decently. And for this, we have a technology, but other people have others. Our technology is called the chemical checker. And the peculiarity of this technology is that it's very focused on compounds, on small molecule compounds, and it works very well in this transfer learning scenario that I was mentioning before. It's very good for translating knowledge from the bench side to the bedside, okay? Very good, so that's my last slide. I would just like to mention that we have several ongoing collaborations here in the African continent, including Zambia, the University of Cape Town, and also the University of Buea in Cameroon, and that we are receiving support worldwide, for which we are very thankful. That's it, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miquel. That was very insightful, and we are pleased to see the wonderful work that you're doing in this area, and we hope that it will translate into something tangible for us. We desperately need these kinds of technologies in Africa, particularly in the context of this COVID pandemics where we've now find ourselves in. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the second presentation by Dr. Fidele Ntie-Kang. Dr. Fidele Kang is the head of Molecular Simulations Laboratory, Department of Chemistry at the University of Buea in Cameroon. Over to you, Doc.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great.
So Fidele is my name. I work in the chemistry department, particularly our research group is working on molecular simulations. So the talk today will be to show you the data we have been able to collect basically from African medicinal plants and how large-scale analysis of these data could be useful or delivering new drug candidates, or possibly give you new knowledge about biological activity. Now, I would say a small introduction that a lot of data has been made available for compounds from African medicinal plants, but a lot of this data is just the chemical structures. So we have a lot of information about traditional uses of plants. And of course, some of this information is just not validated. And we have a lot of information about chemical structures. But now the question is, how do we drive knowledge from the traditional medicine, the knowledge of the chemical structures of compounds, to biological activity, or to give us ideas as to which of these molecules from these plants a potential drug. And so in essence, I would talk basically about the construction of our natural product database, which we call the African Natural Product Database. And I would show you potential applications that can be derived from this data. Our campus is just beside the Mount Cameroon, a very beautiful scenario there. And we have very excited students, are very motivated to work. And this gives us the opportunity, more or less a platform on which we can build our research. Now, we would say not only the Mount Cameroon is very rich in flora diversity, we also have a lot of this flora diversity in the equatorial forest, which we happen to share with the DR Congo, with the Republic of Congo, with Gabon, with Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea. So we happen to find ourselves in the Congo basin, and this is a blessing for us. But our initial research was just around this area, focusing on medicinal plants growing around our country, which we later on try to push the idea beyond to cover the entire continent. So this inspiration was drawn from a discussion with Professor Abegas, who for many years was one of the pillars of natural product research in Africa. And he worked in the University of Addis Ababa, where he later transferred to the University of Gaborone in Botswana. And when he retired, he became the director of the African Academy of Sciences. And the question we were asking ourselves back then, when I was a young PhD student, was, if we put all the information from academic groups that have been published in the literature, whether the data is accessible or not, and we put all the information from undocumented sources, for example, interviews from traditional healers about the use of plants, and we put all the information regarding chemical structures and all of that together in a filter to try to pick out the useful information and the non-useful information, how many compounds from African flora be considered as having a biological activity or a useful biological activity? Because of course, toxins have activity. The activity is not useful for us, except if we want to use them to kill weeds or kill unwanted organisms. And so this discussion was quite thrilling, and some of the experiences that Professor Abegas got from working on African medicinal plants and some of the challenges he faced have been summarized in that paper there, in the Nature Chemistry paper. And we realized that a lot of information, the libraries are just trapped in there in hard copies. That means, for example, a thesis is defended at a university, and at the time we're talking, many of the universities do not yet have a library, which is a digital library. So all the work was in paper form. Somebody has to go through the dust and go through the sneezing to get access to the data. And the next thing was that many of the papers that were published in scientific journals by Africans themselves were inaccessible to African scientists. So because many of the universities did not have subscription to many of the electronic journals that we know. Of course, many of the information stored in herbarium and other infrastructure where species have been conserved were dilapidating. And the next thing was that many of the custodians of traditional knowledge would know the use of these plants and so on were dying out, and some of them were passing out this knowledge to their own descendants, and some of the descendants were not interested in this traditional knowledge. And of course, traditional knowledge which is phasing out without validation, without scientific validation, led to the fact that many of the trees, the species were getting extinct because of the advancement of development. Construction was going on, trees were being down, some for construction, just to expand habitable space by humans. And all these problems put together brought us to the fact that also it's possible to think that many people are studying the same species while there are some rare species that are not being investigated. So it became important for us to document all this information and make it available technically to all scientists on the continent. And so this gave us a chance to start off this initiative that started off with the north of the continent. So we have done a lot. I will not say all the details, but I will show you the first openly accessible library that was made available online was the Northern African Natural Product Library. And of course, it is still available online. Now we have data also from East Africa online, and we are preparing that all for the entire continent. So some of the data we have already in our lab, and we have not yet made it available online. Okay. So the idea is that by prospecting all the organisms, the plant organism, for example, the corals, the bacteria, and so on, which are likely supposed to contain active molecules, we can now be able to identify from natural product chemistry the compounds that are found in these species. Eventually, among these compounds, which of them are have potential applications in pharmaceutical research. So that was just the idea. And so what we did was, in brief, we consulted all the journals that publish research on natural product chemistry. We went to university libraries and studied up data from PhD thesis and MSc thesis, and we checked them country by country, cataloging all this information, and then see which of the information is useful, and try to know which molecules were identified on which species, references in the literature, who are the authors involved. So we put all this data together. I find a way of representing the chemical structures in a way that computers can interpret them. For example, like smile strings and so on and so forth. And then find links in the literature, link all the plant species, the compound species, for example, were linked to chem, where this compound were available in chem, and so on and so forth, taxonomy data of the plants, and how all this information together with physicochemical properties and toxicity profiles and so on be made available online. So this is just the idea. And it's a very simple database scheme which connects the chemical structures to chem, connects the literature to PubMed, connects the taxonomy of the species to taxonomy database and post database. The was also done, and all this information was made available online. Basically, information from bacteria, compounds made from bacteria, from corals, from plants, and from fungi. So we have this available online, as I mentioned before, and you have very useful tutorial there. Those who are not very initiated to this, you can download the tutorial and try to implement it. It's very simple and straightforward. And so what are potential applications for this? Generally, computer-aided drug discovery is classified into structure-based drug design and ligand-based drug design. So in essence, the goal is to assist the identification of active compounds, so somehow to identify a lead compound and see how this lead compound will be optimized. So in general, if you know the chemical structure, 3D structure of a drug target, for example, an X-ray structure extracted from the data bank, you can make use of the known interactions within the pocket of this protein, extract useful information that could be useful for screening the entire library by the use of a computer, actually like molecular docking and molecular dynamics and so on. And eventually, out of that large number of compounds, it's possible to just a few that could be tested in the laboratory. Of course, another approach would be by knowing, for example, a bioactive compound for which you don't know its mode of action or its target site. Of course, you can extract pharmacophores from there. You can do substructure searches. You can do similarity searches. You can do machine learning approaches. You know, a number of active compounds and see what they have in common. And just look at the database and ask yourself, what do these compounds have in common, which have an activity, which is so present in my database. So in essence, the idea is that at the end, with several thousands of compounds in our database, for a particular disease situation, we are not going to test all of the several thousands. We are going to use artificial intelligence approaches to identify which of them should be forward in the assay. So that's just the idea of this database. So in essence, quite a number of people have participated in this. As I mentioned before, we have the database which is now available online, and of course we are working towards making, including sample availability. We give information if the compound is available, for example, as to be tested, and how much of it is available, and all of that, and so on. So a lot of people have made input to this work, and I would acknowledge a few of them on this slide. We don't have time to go into details, but we have quite a number of collaborators there, including Miquel, who just gave the presentation before me. And thank you very much. We just received support. We have received support from several organizations before, and one of the most important we just got is the grant challenges for the Source Juma fellowship that I just announced last week, and I'm so grateful to acknowledge this. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kang. Maybe if there's any questions to the two presentations that we've had in this session, we'll take those now. Otherwise, we do have a session at the end for Q&A. If you do have, because you can't speak, maybe put them in the chat, and then we will attend to them in the sessions. We do have. There's a question: is their database accessible to the public? I'm not sure if that's directed to you, Dr. Kang.
Yes, it is. You can find it online. I gave the web link for if you are not. I think it's quite fast. Just see, this is the web link. You can. I will share my slides, of course. I would
yes.
My slides are available there's nothing to hide there. So you can visit this web link, and the database is there for everybody. You don't need a login. You don't need to identify yourself. You can just search it. If you have a browser, Firefox, Chrome, anything, you can have access. We are mobile phone.
All right. No, thanks a lot. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the next speaker, who is Professor Kana. Professor Kana is the academic leader of research at the School of Life Sciences at UKZN. Professor Kana, are you ready for us?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to take part in this webinar and share some of the work that you are doing in the space of machine learning and bioprocess technology with the audience. And also thank you very much for the participant that you've created some time to come to listen to this presentation. The aspect given to me focuses on the application of machine learning in bioprocess technology. And the outline that I will follow throughout this presentation will be on just a brief introduction, which align with what has been said earlier on. Brief introduction on the AI, machine learning, and deep learning. Then I will focus on application of machine learning in bioprocess modeling and optimization. After that, we'll look a little bit how how machine learning is used for monitoring and control. Then natural language processing in bioprocess development. If time allows, I will talk briefly on the machine visions and bioprocess technology. And the other aspect will be to issue a call for a global repository of intelligence, which I will elaborate on that aspect. Then I'll go through some live demos from our laboratory that we have deployed online, which is available to the community. First, if you look at artificial intelligence itself, we define it as it is an intelligence that is demonstrated by any machine, which is as opposed to natural intelligence. There are two keywords. One is artificial, that is something that's not natural. And one is intelligence, which has to do with the cognitive value, reasoning. Now, in a sense, any code or any algorithm that can enable machine to make human is referred to as artificial intelligence. The three major components which we've been talking about in addition to AI is machine learning and deep learning. And having said that, the machine learning is just a simulation of human intelligence by computers. That is the learning, the reasoning, and the self-correction. And machine learning itself is a subset of AI, in which machine learn from the data and make predictions that are very accurate without programming the machine, without writing any code. Whereas the deep learning is a subset of machine learning that enables computer to handle more large amount of data and is particularly useful in the speech recognition and machine vision. Just to illustrate what I mean, you have a big set, which is AI itself. Within the big set, you have the machine learning, which is a subset of AI. And within the machine learning, you have the subset, which is called the deep learning. Just create a little background of what we talk about machine learning, deep learning, and AI. But deep learning and machine learning belong to AI. That area that's of great concern to us is the machine learning. And I said previously that is the capability of machine to learn without being programmed. The traditional computing, you have to create the rules to program a computer, to write code. If then do this, repeat until. That is, you have to give those rules to the computer. But in the case of machine learning, you have the data, you have the solution, you ask the machine to find the rule. Right? That's why you don't really need to program the machine, but you expose it to environmental conditions, and you ask the machine to identify the rule that can lead to a better environment. Let me put this in this context a little bit. Think a little bit, you have a bioprocess, perhaps to produce citric acid, and is subjected to different parameters and environment. What you can do is that you can decide to create a machine learning model that will look at these process conditions and the output, which is the citric acid. Without telling it any rule, you ask a machine to extract the nonlinear relationship that exists between the process conditions and the product. And that's how machine learning is capable of doing. One of the machine learning that's particularly very important is artificial neural network that is built on the structure and function of biological neuron. The same way that we have signals flowing around the natural neuron, the artificial neuron also has signals flowing around it. In other words, it is referred to as a mathematical processing unit. The same way that the biological neurons are interconnected with synapses, you also have the artificial neurons that are interconnected. The key difference between the simple neural network and the deep learning lies in the number of hidden layers. If you look at single neural network, which is already good machine learning for bioprocessing, it has one or two single hidden layers, whereas the deep learning itself has more layers so they can handle more data. Now, in the practical term, how do you apply machine learning in the virtual on your data? The life cycle of machine learning is as follows. You have to have data. Data are like the fuel for machine learning. Data need to be available. Right, just like the previous presenters have said, that machine learning is simple, but the complexity lies on how to get good data. Now, the first step is to get good data, then followed by data pre-processing. And within that data pre-processing, you have to go through data preparation, data cleaning, data analysis, training the model, testing and validating the model, but more importantly, you need to deploy. And I really would like to emphasize on the area of deployment, because you could have a beautiful machine model, but if you don't deploy it, it slips in your drawer. It's not useful to anyone except yourself. It's an aspect that I would like to emphasize towards the third part of this presentation. If you look at it, AI has found its way into virtually every field of study. You have AI that's applied in machine translation, social network, machine learning, robotics, Internet of Things, image analysis, graphic analysis, audio analysis, visualizations, virtual assistants. I look at AI as the new mathematics. You see, mathematics could be applied in geography, is applied in life science, applied in computer science, applied even in linguistics. In other words, AI could be applied to virtually any field of endeavor. And I think at some stage, the policymaker should consider the option of making AI as one of common or mandatory course, even at a lower level of education. With regards to bioprocess technologies, you have a number of AI, a number of areas which can be modeled or which could be used, which AI can use to improve. For example, machine learning will be applied to bioprocess technology. Modeling and simulations will be one of the core areas that bioprocess technology will benefit from. Deep learning will also impact on the bioprocess technology. Natural language processing is one of the core areas that many biotech companies are leveraging on it, which I will explain towards the part of this talk. Now, the two core areas which I will focus with respect to the application of machine learning bioprocess technology are the area of modeling and optimization, and the area of monitoring and control. Bioprocess are generally very challenged when it comes to modeling, because the fermentation process is subjected to a number of parameters. You have the bioreactor parameters, you have the medium parameters, agitations, pH, nutrient concentration, dissolved oxygen concentrations, and all these are affecting the process. In other words, when it comes to modeling this process, it becomes quite complicated. Now, what is the process model? A process model is a mathematical representation of the relationship between input and output, right? We want to understand how the process conditions are affecting the yield, are affecting the output of the process. And these are very complex relationships. Machine learning is capable of abstracting those complex relationships in such a way that we can now understand how the process conditions are affecting the process output. And this model can be used to describe every stage of the process, either upstream or downstream. They are capable of, you can model any aspect or stage throughout the production pipeline. We know for sure that cell growth in bioprocess technology and product formation depends, like I said, on the various parameters such as temperatures, the concentration of different media components. And we need to optimize those processes in order to increase the process yield. And added to that, you have what is referred to as the curse of dimensionality, which is a phenomenon whereby when you increase the dimensions or the number of parameters to try, you have a new chaotic behavior of the process that you're not found under small dimensions. Now, in bioprocess technology, we have that cause of dimensionality, and which also is compounded by the nonlinear behavior of microbial processes. And you have a complex interaction of parameters among themselves, which will definitely affect the process output. All these phenomena will compound, will make it difficult to have a process model in bioprocess technology. But machine learning is highly capable of addressing those issues. For example, if you have a set of process conditions and expose it to machine repeatedly or use it to train the machine, when it is sufficiently trained, it now has the capability of telling you, go back to laboratory or go back to your production plan, use this set of conditions, you're going to have the best result. Simply because machine has been able to understand how the process conditions are how the process parameters are interacting and affecting the process output. Like said previously, this could be applied upstream or downstream of the production process. At upstream, you need to have to formulate a medium. You need to also ensure that you have identified the right process parameters for the cell to grow. At the downstream stage, you need to come out with the right combination of process parameters to give you the right process output. If you look at the trend of publication in recent years, for example, in the past 20 years, if you go to Google Scholar, for example, and you type bioprocess and machine learning, look at the trend of publications has been increasing, especially the past 20 years. There seems to be an exponential increase in the application of machine learning in bioprocess modeling. Let me take you through a couple of examples that my research team at the University of KwaZulu-Natal has worked on. We were able to apply machine learning on yogurt production. Yogurt production is carried out by two organisms, Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus, but these microbes do not agree on the right temperature to produce good yogurt. The idea was to find the right temperature or the right combination of temperatures that could drive the process optimally. And we're able to achieve that using machine learning, and it will reduce the production time from 6 hours to 3 hours. And also the quality of yogurt was assessed to be very, very positive. In doing so, we use not only machine learning, we use another algorithm, which I'm not going to go in detail, but it's a very powerful algorithm that helps. It's also an AI algorithm. It's referred to as a genetic algorithm. It helps to optimize processes as well. We combine both machine learning and the GA to achieve the work above. Another work which was published in Renewable Energy, we look at how we could combine different wastes to produce biogas. And we were able to achieve an improvement of 8.6% in biogas production by using machine learning and genetic algorithm again. And this publication has been cited more than 150 times, which we carried out a couple of years back. We decided to look at between machine learning and other statistical methods, which one is more accurate in capturing the nonlinear behavior of fermentation of bioprocesses. We compared it on biohydrogen productions, which is a fermentation bioprocess, and we were able to establish that machine learning was much more accurate. For example, the R-square for machine learning was 0.91 on the same set of data, compared to the response surface model, which gave an R-square value of 0.73. A similar comparison was carried out on citric acid, and we arrived at the same result, that machine learning are more efficient in capturing complex nonlinear relationships that exist between the process condition and the output. Now, let me just quickly take us through the second aspect, which is on machine learning in bioprocess monitoring and control. We know for sure that the biomanufacturing plant, they need to improve sustainability by having a real-time monitoring. Just like mentioned at the opening of the session about the 4th industrial revolution, that is real. And you have a set of Internet of Things sensors, low-cost sensors are being deployed, and that is industries tapping on it. But the ultimate goal will be to be able to use those sensors for real-time monitoring as the process is taking place. And such a real-time is necessary to lower the number of faulty batches. It's also necessary to cut the maintenance expenses, to minimize the manufacturing costs, to maintain product quality, and more importantly, real-time monitoring will enable us to carry out quality by design paradigm. When you talk about quality by design paradigm, is a strategic process development and manufacturing that need to ensure that the intended performance of a final product they need to ensure that the intended performance of a final product is as expected. But to achieve it, we need to have proper analytical technologies that will be utilized to control the process and monitor critical process parameters and critical quality attributes at critical control point. We need to have real-time means to be able to monitor those critical quality attribute and critical process parameters. But unfortunately, the bioprocess technologies, we don't currently, without AI, you have parameters that are not measurable, or perhaps perhaps they are not easily monitored in real time. And the cost of measuring those parameters could be quite prohibitive. And therefore, machine learning has to come and carry out some estimations with what is referred to as biosensors, or soft sensor rather. What a soft sensor do is that they're able to make predictions on some critical quality attribute of the process, which is being used into the control algorithm to adjust the process in order to achieve the required outcome. In other words, a number of parameters that cannot be measured because they're so expensive to do that. So machine learning will make an estimation of those parameters based on input from existing sensors in such a way that the process can ultimately be controlled. We have also used machine learning in bioprocess. Machine learning can as well be used, can be trained on historical process data in such a way that it can predict the future value based on the past pattern. We have used machine learning as an analytical tool. You know for sure that analytical tools are very important components of research and process development, but some are too expensive and costly to maintain as well. What we have done so far was to use AI to develop and validate virtual analytical tool that can give us the profile of 21 volatile compounds when we carry out pretreatment of some lignocellulosic material. In a similar pattern, we have also used machine learning to predict the amount of sugar recovery when it comes to predictions. In other words, these machines will reduce the amount of time as well as the resources that are needed to carry out those experiments. We bypass those experiments by using these virtual sensors. Let me just take us in the area of machine learning, in the area of natural language processing for bioprocess technology. First and foremost, let us understand that the vast majority of data and bioprocess information is not easily accessible. You have published papers, you have books, you have laboratory notes, but these information are not really accessible. For example, if you want to find out the best medium to produce, let's say, I don't know, any biologics or any bioproduct, you have to go through thousands of publication papers and go and read those papers as human being, which is not always practically feasible. But what natural language processing does is that it's capable of reading those papers, extract the key information that you want, package it in a structured way, look at the relationships, and give you a summary of what you want. If you have typed, for example, on Google search engines, give me the best medium to produce a biologic, you're going to have thousands of papers. But if you use natural language processing with the same query, you're going to have well-packaged information that will actually tell you this is the right component to produce the right ingredients. Of course, it's going to go through several papers before making its own summary. Just like I said earlier on, that or like a standard keyword search that will retrieve document based on the keyword user must read. Natural language processing will read those documents for you and extract the fact and relationship and save you substantial amount of time. You have a number of biotech companies that are leveraging on this natural language processing. You have Pfizer's, you have Sanofi, Merck, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, Bristol Myers, all these big biopharm companies are already leveraging on the natural language processes to go through thousands of documents and extract intelligence. AI-powered machine appointed to board of directors. This is a little bit where some companies are moving in. It may sound strange that among the directors of a biotech companies, you have a robot that's serving as one of the directors and is advising the board of directors on critical issues. This has been carried out by Deep Knowledge Ventures, which is a biotech companies, and they name it Vital. The idea was that even though it doesn't have an official position, but the company has decided not to make any purchase, not to make any investment without consulting this AI-powered machine. And they have reason for that. In actual fact, this company invests into development of drugs that's being used for a number of critical diseases that do not have, that have not yet been, there's no remedy for that. But they realized that in that space, 96% of their investment was a failure until they brought on board this new director that was able to save almost 50% of their losses was rescued. And they agreed that without the intervention of this, robot, the system will have, the company will have gone bankrupt. That's why they decided to appoint this robot as a part of the director, as the board of director. But this wasn't the first time that AI will find its way. We all know that the recent time, Saudi Arabia has decided to give nationality to one of the AI-powered robots, Sophia, which she agrees, and she actually she was very happy with the award. Now, there's a tremendous amount of knowledge in the existing publications. And then I will explain why. Even those publications, even the knowledge, either structure or non-structured intelligence is available on those publications. A couple of the work that we have done again was to take 64 publications in the area of biohydrogen productions. We extracted the data from those publications and we use it to train machine learning. And the machine learning was able to come out with a model that could predict that with this process condition, this is how much biohydrogen you obtain if you carry out a bioprocess. We carry out similar training from 15 publications, and we were able to come out with the best process condition, how to produce, best process condition for microbial electrolysis cells. In other words, those existing data could be used. We can use those existing data and develop very powerful model that will help in the area of bioprocess technologies. I'm going to come back to this slide towards the third part of my lecture because it will take us through some of the demo that we have developed and up to the deployment stage. I'll go back to this slide much more at the end of lectures, but prior to that, let me make this, first let me put the problem in perspective. That
Prof,
we have large.
We need to wrap it up in the next few minutes, please. We still have another speaker after you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will attempt to complete it within 1 minute or two. We have a large volume of experimental data that exists in various publications and databases. And we also know that we have a number of models that people have developed, but that is remain in their drawers, don't really use in the research community. But therefore, we are proposing the development of an open repository of intelligence model, which will name it AI Socket, and that will make model available to the global research community. We've already created a community that you could access from this link. But if you allow quickly, just show some of the model that we have currently working. These models are uploaded on aisocket.org/dashboard. Then we could change the number from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 8. I don't know how much minute I still have. Quickly go through this if I have. Okay, you currently have access to one of such model that is what is referred to, let's say, to AI socket.8. This is one of the models that exists already. You realize that this model is capable of telling you to predict the glucose concentration based on these parameters. You have the interface, but behind it, model is actually running. If you select your process conditions, you ask to make a prediction, tells you how much sugar you should expect. This is a bit how the model works, and tells you, in other words, that keeps the time you should have spent in the laboratory. You have several of such models. If you have some time, you could play around. If you try, for example, one, what this model does is that it predicts bioethanol production in the presence of nanoparticles. You select the kind of nanoparticle you're interested. You choose your process condition and ask the machine to make a prediction. It tells you how much bioethanol you should actually expect. The various research work that I've carried out has been assisted by different students in the laboratory. We have, I will not mention all the names here, but you have the postdoctorate, you have the PhD, as well as the MSc students. Just to add a little bit, in addition to this, one of our development which was mentioned, sorry, it was during the COVID time, the research team was able to develop a system that you upload, if you could see on the screen, as soon as you upload the X-ray at the image of the chest, it tells you if the patient is the probability of dealing with a COVID or a non-COVID person. Okay, thank you very much, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Prof. It's a pity that we couldn't hear your entire presentation, but I hope that you make your slides available so that the participants can go through them in their own time. We have our last presentation, which would be given by Mr. Edoardo Pastore, who is the team manager of the ICT at the EPO and an examiner in the ICT division. He'll go through the, he'll give us a global perspective on the patentability of AI and the requirements for patentability. Thank you very much. Over to you, Edoardo.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try, I would say, in 20 minutes to go through the presentation. I will try to give a flavor at least about a vision that, the problematic that there are in patentability. So especially for, small, medium enterprises, it's quite a critical way because actually the patents anyway, they are there. And for the big players, they're not an issue because this is everything is known. I will go through artificial intelligence and mathematical method. It will be like a detective novel, I would say, in which actually we find the key or the murders at the end, the key issues. I will put together, I would say, artificial intelligence and mathematical method because they are linked, and in a certain way, for us, it's in the same word. Of course, one is more in data analysis, the other is more, in the form. But anyway, there is a certain same line of reasoning. I would say, that the mathematics, it's a very core of several fields of technology. It could be from a protein structure analysis to circuit design, imaging. And this is one, so you have a kind of formula, kind of core technology that generally speaking is actually one that people starting from. And then you have a certain application that are very various. For AI and machine learning, it's actually going through, could be more the data analysis, could be also genetic algorithm in this case. I put together artificial intelligence and machine learning. One is broader than the other, but it could be also an analysis of, processing of signal or determining, was very interesting, this one of soft, sensor. When actually I'm starting, and this is the starting point. So I'm using actually, the starting point is my model, is my machine learning. So this is actually when the people starting from. but I have to translate it. I have to, in a certain way, to translate this in patentable subject matter. I have to translate in something that for the patents make sense. So the first one is actually what we call two orders. It's European Patent Office, this one, but actually it's basically applied all over the world in a very similar cases. In the United States, slightly different. But I would say the concept is that, first of all, I have to go through a process of exclusions, where actually it's maybe just a mathematical formula. And then I have to go to an inventive step, or to say the implementations of my inventions. But let's go, I would say, what actually I mean about the first, when I face into a patent, or when I face into an idea that I want to patent. The first hurdle is that actually is basically is just a mathematical formula as such. So if I have a mathematical formula, a model that's very complicated, whatever, it might be that actually it's not considered patentable because actually it's simply not technical, I would say. So in the second step that I have to go is that actually I have to make to say sense what I'm doing with my method, what I'm doing with my artificial system, what I'm doing with my machine learning, in which way I acquire the information, in which way I process the information, in which way I implement the information. I just wanted to give an example. Yeah. So step by step, and I'm using the mathematical. I have a very complicated mathematical formula. I have a model. I mean, something that I develop, and this is actually, from my point of view, okay, for the company point of view, this is the value added. So basically, I'm doing researches. I'm coming to do a very complicated model, and say, okay, I wanted to patent this one. I wanted to see as a patent. And then if I file as a patent, this is not fulfilling the first requirements because actually it's an abstract model. Even if actually this is, it's, to say 90% of my research, okay, it's not really implemented. There is not translated in a mathematical, in a technical environment. It's not actually processing anything. It just, for me, is a formula. So one is the first parameter. So basically, I have to be more precise. But let's say that I'm more precise, and I can say, okay, but in my mathematical formula, my parameter X, whatever, are not just X, but are temperature measurements. Still, this one, it's still considered, to say, a mental act. So, because actually, I don't know where the parameters are coming from, okay? Of course, I say that the parameter in my formula, in my model, are temperature, but still are abstract, are not related to a physical system. And the second aspect that I'm doing a certain calculation and I remain with my calculation, nice, but there is not an application to my calculation. So basically, I have to go to a more, I have to say, in a precise way. First of all, in a certain way, when I define a system, I model, or I define a formula, I have to say, okay, this is my parameter, and the parameters are coming through a sensor. So I'm linking my model to a physical system, okay? It seems trivial, I would say. This is one of the reasons why we are talking, but this is making the system a patentable subject matter. I'm making certain calculations. It might be that I'm using this, the results of my calculation, the results of my machine learning, the results of my artificial intelligence model, whatever, and I apply this one for controlling another parameter or for, to say, controlling a bioprocessor, for instance. Yeah? So in this case, actually, we have defined the inventions in a technical term. So the invention is not anymore a very theoretical approach, but is a practical one. When actually I contribute to the inventions, and this is there are two axes actually. One axis is the technical implementations. So how I'm doing, how I'm implementing my inventions. This might be the case for certain, to say, modeling machine learning. we will see later on, or even I have the idea of applying my model to a new technical field. Nobody thought to apply the model for controlling the production of yogurt. Sorry if I use in your presentations earlier. So I have two axes in my inventions in order to define the technicality, what I call it. One is the implementation, what I'm doing, how I'm receiving the data, but also is giving in a certain way even the technical field where I'm applying this one. Has anybody else in the past thought to use this one? Has anybody else thought, to modify something that is similar or is completely new? So basically I have two dimensions in order I can look my material, my idea. One is, okay, this is completely a new technical field I'm applying. And then the other side, when am I applying the matter in I'm implementing my idea. I would say the final objective of my invention, and this I repeat, I would say it's very critical, is that my invention, my idea must serve a technical purpose. If I develop a mathematical model, a model that is very nice, but remains at theoretical level, this is for sure going not to be, it does not deserve a patent. But I have to say a certain actions that I'm doing. What I'm doing with this one, I'm controlling a process, I'm controlling a plant, I'm controlling the production, I'm controlling a car, I'm controlling the brake of a car. So in a certain way, I have to implement this one, and not only using my model, it could be a mathematical or any kind of model, but I have to give a certain feedback in the real world. This is in very issues. I would say, let's say what is it controlling? This is that example in which actually there is definitely a technical purpose, is controlling specific technical system. I'm controlling apparatus, or I control digital video, enhancement analysis, encoding of data. I would say, but I wanted to say, even I would say I'm optimizing load distribution in a computer network. So the calculation is so heavy that I have to distribute in the calculation among different processors. I'm providing a genotype estimated based on the analysis of DNA samples. So I have several DNA samples. This is an AI example. And then actually I'm providing a genotype estimate, but I need the samples. I need to in a certain way, or providing a medical diagnosis. Yeah. So I'm providing a lot of, so I'm feeding up with a training data, my model, and then I'm providing a medical diagnosis. This is a clear example of a technical purpose of my invention. I would say this is one of the pillars that I would say, and it's very important. Fundamental. Even when you read, I would say, patents of somebody that is in a certain way claiming a patent against you or whatever, or if you wanted to file a patent, I would say that one very weak argument is when the people say, yes, but I'm using my mathematical model, but I'm using, I would say, less storage, or I need to say, I can processing information quicker. This is generally speaking very, very, very weak argument as to be really proved that implementing the method like that, you save memory, you need really to have a strong argument about that, informations. I just wanted to say, this is about the theory, but I wanted just to go to the main data analysis. AI and machine learning is basically data analysis problem. So it could be the classification, clustering, regressions, or dimensionality reductions. Any of these aspects may be technical or maybe not technical. I would say I'm just talking about classifications of data. I would say the classification of data. If I wanted to classify certain data, in order to know whether a file in the computer is virus infected, I'm talking about computer, it might be a technical problem. But if I wanted to classify data for selling or buying stock on the stock market, for instance, this is not a technical implementation. It would be like a business method, it would be excluded from the patentability. I can also do the clustering of data, in which actually I cluster the data in a similar way. I could identify, for instance, the clustering of data when I have genes, families, in a DNA sample. I would say clustering of data, this operation, it sounds at least very technical, but of course, in a certain way, clustering data for selling more, products on the market, this is not considered to be, a technical implementation. The problem that actually one of the issues that if you consider the machine learning per se, this is our abstract in terms of mathematical nature. So they need to be trained. So in order to come to your model, you have to feed up with trained data. You have to train the issue. So, and this is one important aspect, the training data. The other aspect, if you use like a neural network or support vector machine, which kind of fancy words are not enough. But I would say the machine learning, it's identified, the model is identified by the training data. The other thing is that you have to solve a technical problem. Okay, so which problem I'm solving? I'm solving a problem in production. I'm solving a problem of a medical diagnostic. I'm solving a problem controlling the brakes. I'm solving the brakes of a car. I'm solving a technical problem. I'm controlling a sensor, or even I have to say a forecast, something. Typical example of technical application in AI are image processing, speech processing. This is a very, very classical way. What actually is not technical, at least very clearly explicit in the EPO, is that classification of documents. So it's been evocated also in the previous publications. So the analysis of text just for cognitive linguistic matter is not considered a technical tool. The EPO, generally speaking, is not considered technical all over the world. Different if I wanted to have a certain forecast in the, when I'm doing searching, I mean, doing in Google. So in this case, it's not based, it's based on the previous, search model, difficult to get a pattern on this one. I wanted just to give an example about what does it mean that the training data might be subjected to a patentable. So the model I just explained you, it's basically the system. This is a real application. The system was to recognize a sunset, or forest, or whatever. So especially the sunset, to recognize picture based on sunset was very difficult for several reasons, because sometimes there was trees. And so the idea was to produce a set of training data, expanded. So you take a picture of a sunset, and then out of a picture of a sunset, you produce 100, even 1,000 of the same pictures, modifying the colors, modifying more warm. So in a certain way, you modify the pictures parameter, you expand the training set, and then with this training set, you train your model. This is to be considered a technical problem. Of course, at the time of the application, this is where it say the time is very important. So the fact that I modify the training data, say, yes, this is solving a technical problem, because to recognize, to identify a sunset, so pictures, whatever, it's performing better. The training data is better. So I would say the technical implementations, I would say, it's also very important. And defining, for instance, the way the architecture is working. So it's generally speaking not sufficient to say it's neural network or graphical user interface. I wanted to give another example. So this is about the functioning. So you have a neural network, and the operation is not done by a normal CPU, but specifically on the operation is split among a graphical processing unit or a central processing unit. So so this is about the specific implementations. So I'm not talking about further implementation like for controlling what, but it's about how to implement in a system. And this specific implementation also deserves, because actually you don't use just a computer, but you split the operation in two. Another important aspect, I would say, before going to the end, it's about cardiac output. So you get certain measurement. The people say, but I have my model, and then I have a certain cardiac output. Okay. The main issues that in a certain way, the cardiac output, my neural network, they say I have learned weights, whatever, but they never say how they train. So if you don't say how you create your model, if you don't say which is your the training data, it's basically a magic box. You put input and you get an output, and say this is not deserve a patentability because nobody knows how to perform the artificial intelligence. And this is one of the issues. So the people say, I'm using a model, but they don't say how they do the model. And if you don't say how they do the model, basically the application basically cannot be reproducible because you don't know. So basically it's not patentable. I wanted just to go to the takeaway message. The takeaway message is one important is the level of detail. Provide if you wanted to draft an application, but even if somebody is coming to you with a patent, look at the level of detail. Is abstract or it's really attached to a physical device. Consider that what they call the common general knowledge. The common general knowledge, when actually they expanded the training set for the machine learning, was, to say, at that time limited, now is bigger. So there is more knowledge about the artificial intelligence. And then consider that this all depended to other problems. There should be, generally speaking, technical input, process, and a technical output for controlling, a device, and anchor the system to the real world, I would say. So I think I went over my 20 minutes. So I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Edoardo. That was very insightful to connect the dots in a sense, to say, what do we do with this data analysis technologies and artificial intelligence from a patenting perspective? I see two hands, but I believe those questions have been answered. So I'll give everybody an opportunity perhaps just to type their last questions for any of the panelists. While at the same time, I would like to thank the panelists for their presentation, for their time dedicated to today's session, and also to the attendees who have attended the session. I've been keeping an eye on the numbers during the session, and we were able to retain most of you for the 2 hours, which is always an excellent indication that people have found what we discussed to be quite useful. I don't see any further questions or hands for the panelists. We have reached the end, I believe, of the session accordingly. And as we've mentioned, this is the third of the last of these webinars. We hope to continue with these next year, discussing different topics. And we do hope that you will join us for those, and they will be valuable and insightful to you. Thank you once again to the panelists. Very great job that everybody has done. Thank you to the organizing team that has done an excellent job throughout the year in organizing these events. Africa Bio for providing the excellent platforms, the communication, the marketing, the promotion, the TIA for contributing to finding us speakers, and behind the scenes working very hard to ensure that these webinars are continuing, and to CEDA as well for your contribution involving the SMMEs to participate in these sessions so that they can also develop and have the necessary skills and knowledge to take their businesses forward. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next year. and hopefully next year we'll have more of these interactions, and yeah, we can all benefit from these. Thank you, and yeah, have a great afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.